Okay, so we get back to this list. Oops, go back here in just a second. Are these things biblical? Are there things that we have added to our understanding of the Bible that aren't necessarily biblical? Yes. Let's just be honest. There's some things that we have added without even intentionally adding them. This first one here, will we see our loved ones and our pets in heaven? Loved ones and pets. The Bible does not say that we're going to see them. It does not say that. We actually put together different scriptures in an attempt to make it say that. One scripture being, for example, the Transfiguration, where Moses and Elijah visit with Jesus on the top of the mountain. And the apostles, the disciples are there, and they see Jesus and Moses and Elijah. With the idea being that even in death, Moses and Elijah are recognizable. They're individuals. And that so after so long a time, they continue. Surely those who are faithful, and if we're all going to be in the same place, we're going to be with Jesus, surely our own existence will continue. And we will get to see the loved ones in our death, see them in heaven. Another passage that's offered is in Revelation, I think 19 or 20, where God will wipe every tear from their eyes. The idea that when we get to heaven, for some reason, we are going to weep, we are going to cry. And I've always thought, maybe because, there's great joy at seeing those that are there, but there's great sadness at those that are not. Will we see our loved ones in heaven? I think we will. I think there is that's a strong motivation. Not only will we get to see Jesus in heaven, which is awesome, but to see our loved ones, to see those who are the faithful dead as well. That's a strong motivation as well. What about pets? Will we see our beloved pets in heaven? If it's murky on our loved ones who are human beings, it's even murkier in regards to pets. We do know that animals exist in heaven. Jesus rides a white horse, for example. So it's kind of a tough one to understand. If Jesus has this beloved horse, would we be able to have our own pets? I wish we could come to some kind of definite answer on that, and we just don't. But God helps those who help themselves. That comes from Ben Franklin. That doesn't come from the scriptures. Does God help those who help themselves? Well, He helps those who are helpless. We are helpless in our sin, and He helps us through His redemption. Christians are required to tithe and not work on Sundays. Those are two things I've just cobbled together because neither of them are accurate. Are Christians required to tithe? I was just listening to Malachi this morning. It says, "Bring your tithe in the storehouse and see if I will not pour out an abundance to you." The Christian standard of giving isn't in the Old Testament; it's in the New Testament. It's in 1 Corinthians 8 and 9, and it talks about sacrificial giving. In fact, the occasion that Paul's talking about in 1 Corinthians is about giving to the churches in Jerusalem and in Judea because of the famine. And he advises them to give so much that it hurts, that you give to the point of sacrifice. Is that 10% for you? Is that 20% for you? Is that 90% for you? I don't know. But it doesn't say that Christians are required to tithe. And I will say, if you tithe, if you make 10% your offering, you're not doing a bad thing. In fact, it seems like that's God will give that return if you give to Him. It's just that's not the New Testament standard. Not working on Sundays, not working on the Sabbath. Well, Sunday is not the Sabbath. Saturday is the Sabbath. The Seventh-day Adventists have that correct. But do we transfer those rules back onto a Sunday, first day of the week? Well, the Scripture says gather on the first day of the week. It doesn't say anything about not working on the first day of the week. for Christians. Again, that's an Old Testament rule. Should you work on Sundays? Well, the Scripture does seem to recommend for all human beings 1 day in 7 to rest, whether that's Sunday or Saturday, a day to refresh or a day to recuperate, a day to get right, get yourself put back together. Only men can serve communion. Only men can teach and preach. Only women can play the piano, teach the kids, or other women. These go back to roles. What is the role of men and women in the church? The New Testament seems to be very clear about the role of men and women, especially when it comes to teaching. It says that women cannot teach men. But is that a cultural issue? Is that, the idea that women keep silent in the churches, we see that's not observed absolutely, and it's hard to understand then what he means by that, whether it means something about, gossiping and that kind of thing, or is it, a woman should say absolutely nothing in the course of a church service. We do see it's the men who are called who should be able to teach. It's the women who are called who are able to teach, the younger women and so on, especially in Titus, if you look at that. Playing pianos didn't exist back then, so that's right out. It seemed like men and women equally serve food. So the idea of serving that last meal together, or the serving communion meal, seems to be a moot point. So we've kind of set these absolutes down, these black and whites in the sand, when the Scripture itself is not as distinct. The church building is considered sacred ground. Well, it is now. We call the building, the room in which we worship, we call that the sanctuary. I don't know what we did to sanctify it. We offered a prayer, maybe. We dedicated the building, but we didn't shed blood, as the Old Testament would recommend, to make that room sacred, especially. So the shed blood of Christ, you can say, well, that makes it sacred. Well, that makes every place. The church is not about the building, it's about the people. And what we see in 1 Corinthians 3, that you are the God's temple, you are God's building. He's not talking about the structure that they worship in. He's talking about the people themselves who are doing the worshiping. So it's not the building that's considered sacred ground, it's the human heart, the heart of the Christian. If you want your prayers heard, you need to ask a church or a preacher to pray for you. I love this because you get calls and you get requests from people who are not Christians. Say, will you please pray for me, because I know you have a hotline with God or whatever. If you want your prayers heard, you need to get right with God. It's as simple as that. If you want your prayers heard, you need to talk to God. Asking someone to pray in your stead is helpful. We all want people to be praying with us, because when 2 or 3 are gathered, there he is, and he hears our prayers. But if you want your prayers heard, you need to pray. Is a printed Bible better than an app? I've heard some people say that it's hard to preach from a phone as opposed to an actual printed Bible. I don't think a printed Bible is any more sacred. It's not the materials in which the word is printed on. It is the mind that is receiving them. That's the key. Proper worship comes from a hymnal, not a screen. We could go on and on about the worship wars, about how people worship. But again, is it about the hymnal? Is it about having that printed hymnal with the words printed? Is it about the screen? Or is it about the human heart that is doing the worshiping? All of these are means, not the end. The end is that human heart that is dedicated, that is devoted. It is our lives reflecting the presence of God. Well, I'm going to wrap that up here. Thank you for listening, and I'll catch you next time.